My parents chose to attend my sister's birthday party and didn't show up at my graduation. When I confronted them, Mom said, "You are a man, you don't need us." So I also stopped paying their rent and bills. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I stood at the edge of the auditorium stage, staring into a sea of blurred faces, hoping, maybe even praying, that I had just missed them. That maybe they were stuck in traffic, circling the parking lot, or running late because Mom wanted to fix her hair. My hands tightened around the rolled-up certificate in my lap, the glossy fake diploma meant to symbolize years of exhaustion, sacrifice, and second chances. I should have been proud. I was proud, somewhere deep under the rising ache in my chest. But pride has a funny way of fading fast when you're left standing alone. I had worked for this moment in silence, nights spent hunched over textbooks after long shifts, watching classmates my age party through Instagram stories while I juggled groceries, utility bills, and a job that never paid enough. But I never complained. I told myself it would be worth it in the end, that someone would see me, that they would see me. But they didn't. They didn't even show up. I sat through the ceremony, clapping for strangers, smiling for photos that felt staged and empty. When my name was called, I walked across that stage to the polite applause of people who didn't know me and wouldn't remember me 5 minutes later. No cheers, no flowers, no familiar face waving from the crowd. Just a wide, echoing silence inside my ribcage. After the ceremony, I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts, not even a congrats. My stomach sank. I stood awkwardly near the campus fountain where families hugged their graduates, where mothers wiped proud tears and fathers gripped shoulders like they were proud of something. I watched all of it happen around me, like I'd stumbled into someone else's dream. I gave it another 10 minutes before the embarrassment went out. On the bus ride home, I finally called my sister. I didn't know why. Maybe just to hear someone's voice. She picked up on the second ring, voice bright and breathless like she'd just come off a laugh. "Oh hey, congrats, bro," she chirped. I waited. "Where's Mom? And Dad?" There was a pause, too long to ignore. "They're with me. It's my birthday, remember?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I had forgotten. Or maybe blocked it out. "So they skipped my graduation for your birthday?" She hesitated again, then gave a sheepish chuckle. "Well, yeah, but it's not a big deal, right? You're a guy. You don't care about that stuff." My fingers clenched around the phone. "Can you put Mom on?" "Sure," she said, then added, "Don't be dramatic." The line crackled, and then I heard my mother's voice, casual and unmoved. "Yes." I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. "You missed my graduation." A sigh. "Your sister only turns 21 once. I only graduate once too." Her voice changed slightly, harder, colder. "You're a man. You don't need us there for that. You're supposed to handle these things." That was the moment. That was when something in me, something old and bruised, finally split. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just hung up. I went home that night and sat in the dark for a long time. I looked around at the small apartment I paid for, the light I left on for them just in case they came by. I thought about the rent I'd been covering on their house since Dad lost his job. The electricity bill I paid last month when they were behind again. All the times I bailed them out without so much as a thank you, because I thought that's what family did. But family shows up. Family says, "I'm proud of you." Family doesn't make you feel like a burden for wanting to be seen. So that night, I made a quiet, final decision. If I didn't need them, then they definitely didn't need me. The following Saturday, I drove across town to their house, the house I'd been paying for. The same one where my name wasn't on the lease, where not one photo of me hung on the walls, though every corner seemed to echo with memories of my sister. Her graduation picture was framed above the mantel. There were birthday cards she'd given them, her university acceptance letter laminated and pinned near the kitchen. I stood at the front door holding my breath, the anger buried in my chest pulsing like a second heartbeat. I didn't knock. I let myself in with the spare key they'd never once asked me to return. The living room looked just as I remembered, dated furniture, a soft smell of jasmine incense from the sticks my mother burned religiously every morning, and a silence that felt thick, expectant. I found them both in the kitchen. My father was reading the paper, glasses sliding down his nose, while my mother stirred a pot on the stove, humming faintly. It hit me, right then, how little they seemed to be affected. No tension in the room. No air of guilt. Just another ordinary day in the home I'd been financially propping up for 2 years. I graduated last week, I said, voice low but steady. It cut through the room like a knife. My father looked up briefly. We know, he said, as if that was enough. I turned to my mother. Why didn't you come? She didn't look at me. She didn't even stop stirring. It was your sister's birthday, she said, like it was obvious. I walked closer. But I told you the date 6 months ago. Her back straightened slightly, but she still didn't face me. You're a man. You don't need us there for that kind of thing. That sentence. That same cold sentence she'd thrown at me over the phone. This time it landed deeper. My mouth went dry. What does that mean? I asked, needing her to say it again, needing to know she meant it. She finally turned, ladle still in hand, her expression unreadable. It means you're supposed to be strong. You don't need hand-holding. Your sister needed us. You don't. My father just nodded silently, like he agreed but didn't want to be the one to say it aloud. My whole life, he let her speak for him. He sat through her dismissals, her favoritism, her silence when I needed words. And I think part of me always excused him for it, told myself he just didn't know how to express things. But at that moment, watching him sit there and let it happen again, I realized he chose his silence every time. I'm done, I said, almost surprised by how steady my voice was. I'm done being the one who takes care of everything while getting treated like I don't matter. My mother raised a brow. What are you talking about? I laughed, bitter and humorless. The rent. The bills. The time I covered your mortgage when Dad was out of work. Or when the lights were going to be shut off, and I paid it without saying a word. You think all that money just appeared? She frowned. That's what sons do. No, I said, my voice louder now. That's what people do when they're loved. When they're appreciated. But I'm not even allowed to ask for your presence on one of the most important days of my life. They both just stared at me, like I was speaking a language they'd never heard before. And maybe I was. Maybe they never imagined I'd find the nerve to challenge the order of things. That the quiet, dependable son would finally say enough. I walked out without waiting for their response. I left the spare key on the coffee table and closed the door behind me. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt clean, like something inside me had finally been named, acknowledged, and released. I didn't owe them anything anymore. Not my money, not my explanations, not even my presence. That night, I logged into my banking app and canceled the automatic payments. No more rent transfers. No more utilities. I stared at the screen for a long time, then transferred that same amount into my savings account. It felt like a small act of rebellion. No, not rebellion. Recovery. Over the next few days, I waited. Waited for a call, a text, an apology. But all I got was silence. The kind of silence that used to gut me. But now it just confirmed what I'd already known but hadn't wanted to face. I had always been optional to them. Necessary when it came to money. Invisible when it came to love. I told myself this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishment. It was about alignment. If I didn't matter when it counted, then they didn't get to matter when it was convenient. So I lived with that decision. Ate dinner alone. Slept better than I had in weeks. The phone stayed quiet. The house stayed calm. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was choosing myself. The first call came on the 3rd of the month, just after noon. I let it ring out. Then came the text from my mother, short, clipped, without punctuation. Rent is due, did you forget? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply icon, but I didn't respond. Not because I hadn't thought about it. Believe me, I thought about it constantly. The pull to fall back into old habits was stronger than I expected. But I remembered standing alone at my graduation. I remembered the look on her face when she said I didn't need them. And I remembered the way my father looked past me like I wasn't even in the room. I owed them nothing. The second week, the messages changed tone. Your father is stressed, she wrote. The water might get shut off. There was no please. No we're sorry. No acknowledgement that anything was wrong beyond the bills not being paid, as if the only role I'd ever served was financial. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Instead, I deleted the message and went for a run. Somewhere between mile 2 and 3, with sweat soaking through my shirt and my lungs burning, it hit me how peaceful my life had become in their absence. No more sudden requests. No more guilt disguised as love. Just space and quiet and a growing sense of ownership over my own damn life. But peace doesn't come without its ghosts. Late at night, lying in bed with the ceiling fan humming overhead, I'd sometimes hear my father's voice, those rare moments when he did speak up. When I was a kid and he taught me how to ride a bike, when he showed me how to fix a leaky faucet, there were pieces of him I missed. But they were just that, pieces. Small, scattered fragments that didn't outweigh the silence, the favoritism, the quiet agreement to let me carry more than any son should. The third week, my sister called. That was the one I'd been waiting for. She didn't waste time. "What the hell are you doing?" she snapped the second I picked up. "Hi. Nice to hear from you too," I said, calm as ever. "Don't be smug. Mom said you cut them off." "I did. You can't just do that. They're your parents." I let the silence hang for a second before responding. "Funny. They didn't think they were my parents when they skipped my graduation." She scoffed. "It was my birthday exactly," I cut in. "And that's always the excuse, isn't it? It's always about you. Every time." "That's not true, isn't it?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "You were the golden child. You always have been. And I never held it against you. Not until it started costing me everything. My time, my money, my sanity. I've been keeping them afloat while they ignored me. And I'm done." She didn't have a response for that. Not immediately. And when she did speak again, her voice was quieter. "They're struggling, you know. So am I." "You're stronger," she said, like it was a compliment. "No. I just stopped pretending I'm okay being used." She hung up after that. No goodbye. No resolution. But I didn't expect one. What I felt in that moment was something close to grief, but not for them. For the version of me that stayed small to keep the peace. The son who kept showing up even when they didn't. The bills went unpaid that month. I watched my account stay full for the first time in ages. With that extra money, I booked a therapy session. Then another. I started going weekly. Talking through the patterns I had normalized, the love I had bent myself into knots trying to earn. My therapist was the first person to say, "You deserved better," and mean it with no conditions. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear that. The month ended quietly. No more calls. No messages. I imagined them sitting in that dim kitchen, lights off to save electricity, cursing me under their breath. But even that image didn't bring guilt, only clarity. I had always been a utility to them. A means to an end. And when I stopped serving that purpose, I became disposable. Still, there were moments I missed them. Or maybe I missed the idea of them. The version I created in my head, the parents who showed up, who clapped the loudest, who hugged you so hard you forgot all the pain before. I mourned them like a death. Not sudden, just final. Then, in the final days of the month, I got another call. From a blocked number. I didn't answer. It was early evening when I heard the knock. Not a frantic one, not angry, just a steady, cautious tapping at the door. I stayed in my chair for a moment, unsure if I'd imagined it. The sun was low in the sky, casting that gold-orange glow that made everything feel softer, like the world was trying to cushion the blow of whatever was coming. I stood, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. There they were. My mother, arms crossed tight over her chest, and my father just behind her, hands buried in his jacket pockets, eyes fixed on the ground. For a second, I hesitated. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I needed that second to make peace with what was about to happen. When I opened the door, no one spoke right away. My mother's mouth opened slightly, like she was preparing to deliver a line she'd rehearsed but couldn't quite remember. My father looked up at me briefly, then back down, as if even making eye contact was too much to handle. The silence stretched until it was unbearable, so I broke it. "What do you want?" My mother blinked, thrown off by the flatness of my tone. "We need to talk." I stepped aside just enough for them to enter, but I didn't move to hug them, didn't ask if they were okay. I led them to the living room where they both sat, visibly uncomfortable, like the couch had grown thorns since their last visit. I sat across from them, arms folded, spine straight. I didn't offer water. I didn't soften the moment. I had done that too many times before. My mother cleared her throat. We're behind on the rent. I nodded slowly. I figured. She looked confused for a beat, as if expecting me to jump in with a solution. When I didn't, she added, we didn't know what else to do. You could have started by apologizing, I said, voice calm but unwavering. Not for the bills. For what you said. For how you treated me. My father finally spoke. We didn't mean to hurt you, son. We were just overwhelmed. Overwhelmed? I repeated, more to myself than to them. You weren't too overwhelmed to go to a birthday party instead of my graduation. It was your sister's 21st. My mother snapped, her tone sharpened by defensiveness. She needed us. And I didn't? I asked. My voice didn't rise, but the weight of the words landed heavy. You've shown up for her every time. Every holiday. Every event. Every emergency. But for me? Silence. Unless you needed something. That's not true, she said, but there was no conviction behind it. I leaned forward slightly. Name one time you showed up for me without expecting something in return. Neither of them answered. That's what I thought, I said. They shifted uncomfortably. My mother tried again. We're sorry, okay? We made a mistake. No, I corrected her. You made a choice. A deliberate one. And you made it more than once. My father rubbed a hand over his face, sighing heavily. We didn't think you'd take it this far. I laughed, short and humorless. You mean, you didn't think I'd stop paying for everything? You thought you could keep disrespecting me and still get the money? That's not fair, my mother said. But it was the weakest protest I'd ever heard from her. It's honest, I replied. She softened her voice, reaching into that motherly tone she used when she wanted something. You've always been so strong, so dependable. And that gave you permission to use me? No, she whispered. Yes, I said. It did. And the worst part? I let you. They both looked like they'd swallowed something bitter. My father opened his mouth to speak again, but I held up a hand. I'm not angry anymore, I said. I'm done being angry. I'm just done, period. I've lived my entire life trying to earn your approval, trying to be the good son, the reliable one, the fixer. And the moment I asked for something as simple as your presence, you told me I didn't need it. Like being a man meant I didn't deserve love. We do love you, my mother said quickly. You love what I do for you, I corrected. You love the convenience of me, not me. Another silence settled between us. But this time, it was different, heavier, because it wasn't just silence. It was truth, finally spoken, filling the space they'd always tried to pretend didn't exist. We'll find another way, my father said at last, his voice low. I hope you do, I said. But I won't be part of it. They stood slowly. My mother looked around the apartment like she wanted to say something else, like she was still searching for the right combination of words to undo what had been done. But there were no words left. Just years of imbalance finally laid bare. I walked them to the door. My mother turned just before crossing the threshold. If you ever need us, I shook my head. I won't. And then I closed the door. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I stood there, hands still on the knob, breathing in the quiet. It wasn't victory. It wasn't relief. It was something else, like shedding a skin I hadn't realized I'd outgrown. That night, I sat on my balcony, sipping tea, watching the city breathe beneath a darkening sky. For once, the silence felt like mine. It started with a phone call from Aunt Lorna. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, mostly by design. She was my mother's older sister, sharp-tongued and skilled in the subtle art of guilt-wrapped concern. The moment I saw her name light up my screen, I knew the smear campaign had begun. I let it ring out, watched the voicemail notification appear, and ignored it. But curiosity eventually got the better of me, and I pressed play with the same reluctant instinct someone uses to poke a bruise. Her voice crackled through the speaker, all sweetness coated in judgment. Hi, sweetheart. It's Aunt Lorna. I just wanted to check in. I heard there's some trouble at home, and I can't imagine why you'd leave your poor parents struggling like this. Family's supposed to stick together, you know. Call me back. No mention of the graduation. No interest in my side. Just the assumption that I was the problem, the prodigal son who'd turned his back. I tossed the phone on the table and stared out the window, heart thudding. Not from guilt, but from the familiarity of it. That was always the way with them. Keep things quiet when I was sacrificing. Cry to the crowd when I stopped. By the weekend, it was worse. My cousin forwarded me a screenshot from the family group chat, a thread of messages filled with passive-aggressive commentary, with my name carefully avoided but unmistakably targeted. My mother had posted something vague but pointed. Some children forget who fed them when they had nothing. Sad world we live in. It was followed by a flood of sympathetic responses. You did your best, sis. They'll regret it one day. God sees everything. I stared at it for a long time, all rising in my throat. It wasn't just the lies. It was the complete erasure of context. None of them knew the sacrifices I had made. None of them were there when the bills came to my email instead of theirs. None of them sat alone at that graduation. But they were so quick to assign blame, to sanctify my parents and vilify me. Because that's what people like them do. They protect the illusion of family, no matter how much it costs the truth. For a moment, I considered defending myself. I hovered over the group chat icon, thumb trembling, crafting a message in my head that laid it all out, what I'd done, what I'd endured, what had finally broken me. But then I stopped, because I knew how that would go. It wouldn't be received with understanding. It would be twisted, dissected, used as proof of how bitter and ungrateful I'd become. And so, I did nothing. I let them talk. I let them believe whatever helped them sleep at night. Still, I couldn't deny the sting. The betrayal didn't just come from my parents now, it spread like a virus through the extended branches of the family tree. People I'd grown up seeing at barbecues and holiday dinners were now shaking their heads behind closed doors, labeling me as cold, heartless, selfish. And the worst part? They weren't even curious about the truth. But something unexpected happened in the silence I maintained. I began to heal, truly heal. I poured myself into the things that fed me. I started waking up earlier, cooking breakfast for myself, sitting in the sun with my coffee instead of rushing off to solve someone else's crisis. I began therapy in earnest, digging into years of emotional suppression, peeling back layers of expectation and obligation that had been wrapped around me since childhood. Each session left me raw but lighter, like I was finally clearing out a room that had been cluttered for decades. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since high school. Page after page filled with memories I had buried. Moments of neglect disguised as discipline, praise that always came with a condition, comparisons that left me feeling invisible. I wrote it all, not to dwell, but to reclaim it. My story, my truth, no longer edited for the comfort of others. One afternoon, I got a message from a distant cousin I barely knew. It simply said, I heard what happened. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. That was it. No elaboration. No need. Just someone who saw the pattern for what it was and reached out. It was the smallest crack of light, but it meant something. It reminded me that sometimes, choosing yourself looks like betrayal to people who only valued your compliance. Meanwhile, my sister continued her own campaign. Cryptic posts on social media about people who forget where they came from, selfies with our parents tagged with captions like real ones never leave. I scrolled past each one with a mix of amusement and detachment. She was playing the role she had always been groomed to play, the favored child, the martyr, the loyal daughter who stayed. And if that gave her comfort, so be it. I was no longer interested in contesting the spotlight. What I wanted was peace. And slowly, piece by piece, I was building it. One evening, I got a call from my therapist's office confirming my next appointment, and as I hung up, I realized I hadn't thought about the family drama all day. Not once. The weight was still there, but it was getting lighter, less consuming. I had found moments of joy in small things, clean sheets, a good book, a quiet dinner. The chaos they once brought into my life had been replaced by something far more unfamiliar, stability. And still, the smearing continued. I heard about it through the grapevine, through friends of friends, and the occasional direct message. They painted me as ungrateful, prideful, too good for the people who raised me. But none of it touched me the way it once would have. Because I finally understood something that had taken me years to grasp. Being misunderstood by people committed to misunderstanding you is not your burden to carry. So I let them talk. I let them twist. I let them build whatever version of the story they needed to feel righteous. And I kept building mine, in silence, in truth, and in peace. It had been 4 months since that final conversation. For months since I shut the door and didn't look back. For months of no bills, no guilt-ridden messages, no walking on eggshells trying to be the son they needed while ignoring the man I was becoming. The silence, once sharp and unfamiliar, had settled into something softer. Not comfort exactly, but clarity. The kind that comes from finally standing your ground and refusing to apologize for the space you take up. I had always thought walking away from family would leave me hollow. But what I discovered instead was that the hollowness had come from staying. My days had changed in ways I didn't expect. I started cooking more, taking my time with it. I'd play old records while dicing onions or stirring sauces, humming along to songs I'd forgotten I loved. I had dinner with friends who asked about me, not what I could do for them, not how I could help, but me. People who listened when I spoke and offered connection without obligation. One of them, Marcus, a co-worker turned friend, asked me over lunch one day, "Do you miss them?" It took me longer than expected to answer. I pushed my fork through the half-eaten salad on my plate and finally said, "I miss the version of them I wish they were." And that was the truth. I didn't miss the manipulation or the cold silences or the way my accomplishments had been treated like footnotes. I missed the idea of family, the comfort, the certainty, the unconditional care that was supposed to come with the title. But ideas don't keep the lights on. They don't show up at your graduation. They don't choose you when it matters most. My therapist once said, "Sometimes healing means grieving people who are still alive." And that sentence stayed with me like scripture. I had spent years clinging to the fantasy that things would change, that one day they'd see me, really see me, not as the provider, not as the backup plan, but as their son, someone they were proud of, not just because he paid the bills, but because of who he was becoming. But if that day ever came, it was no longer mine to wait for. They never called again. Not after the door closed. Not after the rent went unpaid. Not even after the smear campaign fizzled out. I think, in their minds, I had made myself into the villain, and that made it easier to forget me. To carry on with the daughter who never questioned them, who smiled for the photos, who played her part in the performance. Let them. I no longer wanted to audition for a role that had never been mine. My sister reached out once, just a short message. "Hope you're okay." They're doing fine, by the way. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a thinly veiled jab pretending to be concerned. I didn't respond. Not out of anger, just detachment. That was the real growth. Not the rage, not the dramatic declarations, but the quiet refusal to re-enter a room I had finally walked out of. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. And still, there were moments, especially in the early morning, before the world fully woke, when memories would sneak in. The good ones. The rare but real smiles from my father when he taught me to tie a tie. My mother's humming while folding laundry. The way our home used to smell like cinnamon and Clorox on Sundays. It would have been easier if there were no good memories, if everything had been obviously toxic. But life doesn't work that way. Hurt and love often live side by side, and that's what makes letting go so complicated. But complicated doesn't mean wrong. And walking away from people who continually choose to wound you isn't betrayal, it's survival. I had spent most of my life believing that being a man meant shouldering burdens without complaint, that strength was silence, that love was earned through suffering. But now I knew better. Being a man, a whole man, meant knowing your limits, setting boundaries, choosing yourself when others refused to choose you. It meant breaking cycles, even when it broke your heart. On my birthday, I didn't hear from them. No call, no text, nothing. And instead of the familiar sting, I felt peace. I spent that evening with people who had become my chosen family. Marcus, a couple of classmates from my night courses, and Bree, the woman I'd started seeing who made me laugh so easily it felt like breathing. We had cake. We danced in the kitchen. They toasted to me, not the version I was forced to be, but the one I was growing into. Later that night, I stood in the mirror, brushing my teeth, and caught my own reflection in a way I hadn't before. There was a steadiness in my eyes. A quiet, anchored kind of strength. Not the brittle, performative kind I used to wear like armor. This was different. Earned. Felt. Real. I turned off the light and walked into my room, the warmth of the day still humming in my chest. And just before sleep pulled me under, I thought back to my mother's words, the ones that used to haunt me. You're a man, you don't need us. Maybe she was right, but not for the reasons she thought. If this story moved you, inspired reflection, or reminded you of your own journey in setting boundaries, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotionally honest stories that explore the complexities of family, growth, and self-preservation. See you soon in the next story.